My name is Devreet, and my background is in the AI automation space. I got launched into this a few years ago through my last startup I was at called Respell. And I got brought on as employee number two, and we were an AI automation platform. And through there is when my life changed, my career trajectory, and I think also the world changed at that point when like ChatGPT came out, and now there's like this huge influx of like AI tools, AI everything, and but the bigger question of okay, like how do we figure this out and navigate what we're doing? So I've lived back and forth between San Francisco and Vancouver the past few years and met a lot of interesting people and learned a lot of cool things, including trying out a lot of these latest and new tools. And fast forward to what I'm building today is based on a gap I saw in the market where you could have the most cutting edge technology or tool, but it doesn't matter if your customers don't understand it. And I saw that problem repeat itself again and again. We have this cutting edge technology that really is changing the pace of the world and the work as well. But most leaders and CEOs don't actually fundamentally understand AI. And that is where I saw the gap and where I saw people really needing the help. And now my company, Internal Automations, and I work with companies to help navigate their AI strategy and really understand how their business works to tie where AI is going to fit in to get them actually the highest ROI. And then the second piece of our service offering is actually building out the automations, connecting their tech stack. And when I say tech stack, things like their email, their CRM, Slack, etc. Let's run agentic AI workflows throughout all the tools you use, cut down the mundane work, and allow your company to make more money using AI.
What's so interesting is this conversation 5 years ago doesn't make sense. AI is so cutting edge. I remember early in my career, very similar experience. I was in sales, got thrown into RevOps, and then like 2022 RevOps was a hot new thing. Then it was go to market engineering. Now that is like the wave. So this idea of I feel like everyone in these roles kind of you just end up there, especially in startup life. I've been employee number 10 a few times, and hat wearing is the only thing on my resume that makes sense at this point. But
Yeah.
one thing you touched on that's like so interesting is how were you throughout the early part of your career kind of getting into this AI automation thing? How did you really learn to understand this? I think one thing I found with especially a lot of early employees or early founders is there's so much unknown. Back when you probably started that part of your career journey, there were no really best practices because the tool was so bleeding edge. There was no real understanding of AI automation. People were thinking it could take over the world, doing 1,000 different things. How did you teach yourself this? Because employee number two, you're really on that ground floor. How are you able to learn while also building the plane while flying?
Such a good question. I think the biggest thing that one set me up for success for this role and why the CEO even brought me on is I had such a diverse background in things I'd done before in my lives before operations, tech, retail, sales, just a variety of different things. And I think you probably relate to this. Anyone who's brought to a founding team, whether it's like honestly 15, 20 below,
Yeah.
you really just have to have that ownership mindset of I'm here to be a part of the mission and the team, and you're willing to just figure it out. And that's what CEOs want more than anything. They want someone who, because when you're at that company, you realize really quickly you still have so many things to figure out. You don't know what your GTM is, your
Mhm.
positioning, like any of that stuff. So you're figuring it out. Then you want to bring along a team of people who are willing to just roll up their sleeves and figure it out. So yeah, there was a lot of things I did in that first job as employee number two, entering Silicon Valley and like figuring out so many parts. I touched on literally every single aspect of the business except for coding our platform, but I was still working with engineers on
Mhm.
figuring out product features. And yeah, it was just, I don't know, I've never done this, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go figure it out and we'll figure it out together. So that's definitely the formula to success, but
Mhm.
also a lot of stress.
it the great saying I tell all the employees I hire is don't to come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. And in the sense of there's probably non-answers to the question you have, like, hey, what's our positioning for this market? And probably the answer is we actually have no idea. We've never even considered that market. So one thing I've tried to instill with all early employees is okay, you have a problem. what is the problem? Tell me as your manager or your executive, what is the problem? But also, how do you think we should solve it? Because 9 out of 10
Yes.
times, your idea is probably what I would come up with. And then you can run in the same thing, that ownership mentality. I think that's probably the hardest thing in early startups is, especially if you come from the corporate world. And again, I work for startups and have an MBA, and everyone hates MBAs in the startup world because they're so processed. They need data, and there is no data. There's no best practice. You need to figure it out as you go. But it's that constant thing I remember always being told is inaction is probably more deadly than any action you're going to take because we just have to figure it out. And there's only so much analysis paralysis you can do. When you started, obviously, like working and starting scaling this business, early in that AI automation thing, what really, I guess this is maybe more of a challenging question, but it's always an interesting one. Was there anything when you learned about it that you realized, oh my goodness, this is going to change everything? Did you have that eureka moment around AI? Was there any tool or anything where you're like, oh my goodness, this is, I don't know if been anything else in our lifetime that has been this shocking. Like, cause I wasn't real, I was alive when the internet became popular, but I was a child. So I can't remember the 2000.com bubble or boom. Was there anything or any tool where you're like, oh my goodness, this blew your mind to the power of AI?
Like, not particularly what we were building, but just any tool.
Like any tool, or even when you're building, when you realize that AI would be instrumental in changing how the world's going to operate. Even maybe before this role specifically, did you have a AI experience that changed your view on AI?
Yes, I would say it wasn't immediate. Like,
Mm-hmm,
I was working in AI. We were
mm-hmm,
building an AI platform. That's what we're selling. And I think I was so weeds in, like being in San Francisco and like
mm-hmm,
building our product, like figuring out everything, working those crazy hours. And there was like a moment, I think it was within 6 months of me being there for that role, where it was that click moment of, holy, this is
mm-hmm,
really going to change the way the world works, especially at the speed
mm-hmm,
at this technology, how it's developing. So we had a few companies working out of our office as well. We got
mm-hmm,
a huge office, and we were like, we want other cutting edge technologies around here to build the startup culture, the vibes. And there was this product, Blend AI voice
mm-hmm,
agents. It was just the two co-founders at the time working out of our
mm-hmm,
office. And we had an integration with them on our platform where you could use Blend to, program a workflow, make calls, etc. It was pretty crappy in the beginning.
mm-hmm,
And I was like, oh my God, like it's always bugging out. Like, it glitches out when you ask a question. But within just a few months of then where I tested the product later and we were still
mm-hmm,
iterating with it, and it was so good. I was like, holy, like I time flew and I didn't even realize how many months it's been. But the fact how much better it's gotten, it was just that click moment, like, oh my gosh, Deb, like wake up, like this isn't you're so in the grounds deep, like there is
mm-hmm.
so much stuff being developed around you and how quickly it is. So that was a big moment for me. So that tool in particular, yes, but also just like how quickly all these models, like even with OpenAI, like how much better they're getting, and that was almost scary but also exciting in terms of like, wow, there's gonna be a lot of implications and
Mm-hmm.
how this is gonna change the way we work.
Yeah, I think for me, it was probably a lot of the automations I always found really exciting. In the early days, I've been obviously playing with AI adjacent tools probably since, late 20 teens when it was the early stage where like an automation or workflow, like a Zapier was considered not really AI, but at least some
Yeah.
cool neural networks you're building or workflow automation. And then right when it was, I mean, the lovables, the front end stuff, I think what's really interesting, and I think this is something, it's a good follow-up question, is I think what's really interesting, because I've been in the techiest, more in Canada, in more in the KW area, was like on the techie side, there was so much innovation happening. But I found on the mass, like the consumer side, AI wasn't making, ChatGPT was cool because they could ask questions, but there was not really a focus on front end because making some assumptions, like a lot of the engineers were like, that's visuals don't matter. It's all about the data and optimization and interest, until there was this breakthrough with this whole vibe coding push where now the layman, my not my dog, like my mother could build an application. And this is when their eyes started opening, like, oh my goodness, I understand the use of this. I understand the power. And that's, I think, where we're seeing a lot of the shift. When you were building this company and helping it scale, obviously in your world, AI was bleeding edge, a lot happening. how are you able to communicate to, let's say, another organization or another person of like the power of AI for to get them to understand it? Because I found that translation, what you find is cool, is a lot like telling a friend about a hobby they care nothing about. And that can be a lot of challenges with these businesses is in your world, you're optimizing the last 1%, but to them, that doesn't mean anything. How are you able to translate the coolness or the effectiveness to someone who may not understand the technical requirements around the models you're using or the workflows around it?
So, a couple things. One, funny way. Bring someone you know to San Francisco, get them to ride a Waymo. They'll understand. A self-driving car, a great way to understand where the world's
Mhm.
going. I recently took my grandma, and that was just self-explanatory, me explaining my world to her. Um, but on a more practical lens,
Mhm.
what you're hitting on is the million-dollar question.
Mhm.
I think I've seen this time and time again working with some of the smartest engineers who are so talented building amazing product. But if you cannot convey the value to someone else, it doesn't matter how cool it is because you're not going to have anyone understanding it or buying it. And that is exactly what caused me to launch my business because of the
Mhm.
gap in the market I saw. That you can have these tools, but if companies and teams aren't understanding it, there's only so far you can go. And there's a limited number of people who actually understand the tech and are developing it, but there's a
Mhm.
whole world of people who do not understand it. And that was actually my job, being that
Mhm.
person, being the middleman and translator. I had a technical understandings working with the engineers, but then conveying it to all our customers. And honestly, I thought the product was revolutionary at the time.
Mhm.
So did our customers. Like within demos and explaining, like really hitting on pain points is actually the best way. Like this is what you do. Imagine like if you
Mhm.
could automate you manually copying and pasting
Mhm.
data into your Excel.
Mhm.
Whoa, right? Like really relating to people and their use cases, I think is the biggest thing. Like if I'm talking to a sales rep
Mhm.
about automating like something I did for a legal team, like those use cases, and they probably don't care, nor does it resonate. But the way automation works in particular, it is quite the same type of
Mhm.
formatting, but just translate it into like a use case and a flow that is relevant to the person you're speaking to and their manual workflow. So
Mhm.
yeah, that was kind of the how we would convert, how we'd get the value across. And people were really excited when they were first hearing about this.
One thing I've been on many sales calls. I've been probably in a demo with almost every AI tool out there. It's almost a hobby of mine when helping work with the organization I work with, just understanding what tools are out there. So I've been on all these demos, and I'm
Yeah.
surprised. Again, typically it's two technical founders have a startup, and then you'll do a demo, and this is where even some of the YC cohorts now, it's like the sales training is a work in progress. But I've had so many demos where they're like, well, what's the use case you have of my application? And I'd be like, well, what does your app do? And it's this back and forth of it can do everything. I'm like, well, what does that mean? They're like, well, what do you mean? And the sales calls don't go anywhere because I'm like, I'm calling you to help me figure out how to solve my problem. I don't understand. And it's like this again, it's this translation becomes a big issue. I think one
Yes.
challenge I've seen a lot is I forget what this it's a saying is like don't bother a happy child. Whereas all these times in these demos, I see someone like eyes open up, like, oh my goodness, with this AI tool, I can summarize my emails. Like, but then the company says, but no, there's so much more you can do. And then they almost lose the sale because they're trying to sell them all these futuristic things. And you can just see that person on the other end get so stressed out because there's too much stuff now. So I found a lot of times all these AI companies, it's how do you simplify it? And if they're happy, let them be happy with that simple workflow and then educate them. And oftentimes there's too many options out there and it's the analysis paralysis. And I think this is the same thing we're seeing with all these tools out there. And especially with the organization you're creating, this tool chasing. Every week there's a new tool that is that marginally better and that can change the world. It's everything you did before was wrong. Now it's right. How, as an organization, at least workflow or approach, when do you best practice, I guess, to like look for a new tool versus learn what you have? How do you manage that balance when there's every week a new YC company raising $20 million to do something that seems better?
Yeah. So this is a lot of what I hear on intro calls with
Mhm.
clients where, they see something really cool they saw on LinkedIn or Twitter or so and so is
Mhm.
building this out like we need this, but it's a matter of okay, are we tool chasing? because you can do that all day, and we kind of talked about that in the beginning today of,
Mhm.
well, you can chase after these shiny objects, but what is the fundamental issue at hand?
Mhm.
And so it's the wrong question to go after. The right question is actually, let's identify where the pain points and problems are. Let's set those foundations. Then it'll become quite obvious which tool we need to use according to our problem. And just even on that, what you said of selling the world, everything, like you have the simple use case of like document transcription, but we can sell you the world. There's so much more you can do. It's overwhelming. I think what I've learned over time working with different businesses is that simplicity is the way to go. You actually don't need the most complex workflow to make your like change your world. Like you start off with
Mhm.
actually the simple ones, and it could do a lot of heavy lifting for you, and there's a compound effect. So I think more so I really go after understanding what the business is trying to do, objectives, where they're drowning, and then finding measuring that with ROI. Okay, like, well, does it make sense for us to automate stuff for your sales team that's
Mhm.
generating revenue, or should we start off with like people ops? Like it's like pros and cons. Like
Mhm.
where's the business decision that's going to reap you the most awards, rewards? So yeah, that's kind of how, I guess, to answer your question, balancing that, and then we'll figure out the tools later. But I really try to be tool agnostic, and also
Mhm.
I simple as the approach. I'm not trying to sell tools. I actually try to even minimize what tools you're using, because
Mhm.
actually a lot of teams have a lot of unused software that I'm sure you're
Yep.
familiar with, where you have this and this, and actually a lot of these tools have now AI features. So why don't we utilize what we have with that first before going and buying something else?
Mhm. It's I found this, especially now having a few years within the AI ecosystem of every tool having AI, it was almost became a double diamond issue where initially there were everyone's tech stack was very bloated. Then AI was going to simplify it. One tool can do everything. But now it's the inverse. Now it's, well, now you can't just use OpenAI API keys for everything. There's a model for every specific use case. So now the tech stack has blown up again, where I'm talking to organizations and founders where their AI tech stack is 50, 60 tools because everyone is for a specific model can do one thing when half the time their product isn't technical. I'm like, your user can't tell the difference between these two image generations. They just need a image for a storybook. I think this is the one challenge where, again, it depends on the founder, depends on the person, is what is the, like you touched on, what is the actual value prop we're trying to solve here? And is it a tool? Is it just a process? Or is this such a marginal improvement where it doesn't really matter because the switching costs are so much higher to rip out one tool and put it back in? What one thing that's I found always interesting is, and this would be interesting to get your perspective on, is over these years using all these AI tools, was there any idea of AI or any use case you thought would be a bigger use case that just wasn't as effective initially than you thought? Like that you were super excited for, there's a lot of hype around, then you realized, okay, well, we're trying to automate something that doesn't really need to be automated. Does anything come to mind?
Mm, I would say, okay, being just in the AI automation platform
Mhm.
space, I try out a bunch of platforms, right, to
Mhm.
automate plug and play your tools too.
Mhm.
When I first got into this world, I thought that was so crazy and insane.
Mhm.
But from a product perspective, really quickly realizing that when you're such a horizontal platform, it is very hard to get market traction, because again, conveying that value to users, they are trying to understand, where do you bring value? Yeah, we
Mhm.
can do it all, but that doesn't answer the question of what can you do. So I realized really quickly how hard it is.
Mhm.
And there's a ton of platforms that are actually, the space has gotten so much bigger just in the past 2 years of a new platform. Um, I'm curious if you've tried them out as well. But so I think that was one understanding, and kind of where the hype
Mhm.
went down. I'm like, wait, to really double down, I think it makes sense to be like a specific, target a specific niche. And maybe it's like
Mhm.
sales for recruiting. I don't know, like, right,
Yeah.
something very niche down. And
Mhm.
I find it so much easier selling and also finding PMF, product market fit.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing, okay, so I think voice agents are really cool,
Mhm.
but I don't know, the human element. There's so much, I think, now in this world of AI, I'm finding more than ever, people want human connection. Like
Mhm.
there's almost like this trust thing. Like, are like, I'm just getting spammed by these AI automated messages, or even like now if you get an AI phone call, like people want that person piece. And I think the winners are going to be who understand where to sprinkle AI in your workflows,
Mhm.
right? It's having that human connection there and human piece, but it's like in the right ways, balancing both. So yeah.
Mm. I think you touched on one thing. So I think the biggest thing for me that was not as exciting was when it was like the AI personal assistant aspect, where it was like a generalist that can do it, read all your emails and do everything. Mostly for me, because I have no idea what I want to do. And if I don't know what one to do, the AI can't help me figure out what I want to do with my life half the time. So that was one issue that I was like, oh, I need to prompt it, but my issue is I don't know what to prompt. So then it was like this never ending battle of how we summarize everything when you're so generalistic, when there's no real use case. It became a big issue. But you touched on another one that was heavily in my world now is the AI SDR. Well,
Mm,
AI agent will do all the phone calls, book all the meetings, it'll do everything for you. Because and this I had many friends in sales as first started my career who's like, oh, my career is done. AI is taking over my career. It won't exist anymore. When I grew up, this is a really funny story, but it's very relevant. My dad said, you need to learn to play golf if you want to be successful. And me being a contrarian, I said, I've never played golf in my life. And then for like the past 10 years, this was actually, I was like, I'm a genius. I'd never been invited to a golf game anymore. And I'm like, this is perfect. Everything's virtual, everything's online. I proved my dad wrong. Golf was useless to my career. All of a sudden, over this past 6 months, I've been invited to golf like 7 times because everyone now sales reps are even more valuable because it's that in-person connection. So in-person meetings have skyrocketed for me. That off-site trips or the golf, or I'm trying to get more into pickleball. I like pickleball more, so I'm trying to do some pickleball meetings, but or padel because I'm trying to be more European again. But I think that's the funny thing now, where it's what was a dying skill, which was that in-person schmoozing or just chit-chatting, was lost because of virtual meetings. You didn't technically have to be as good, but now it's just even more important being able to make that personal connection at scale because you're being bombarded by AI phone calls, AI emails. That human connection comes back. So unfortunately, my dad was correct about 30 years ago, and he told me I have to learn how to play golf. I need to start taking my golf lessons again because in person, like you said, is becoming so much more important, especially on the enterprise side where people are, as you said, inundated with all these ads. There's 1,000 tools out there. They just want to hear a friendly voice to say, what can I do here? How do I
mhm.
digest all of this? Which is, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
very funny thing to see what sticks. No one can predict. I would never. I thought sales was done, and now sales is more important than ever with the in person aspects.
that is so funny. Oh my gosh. Have you, by the way, when you were talking about the SDRs,
Mhm,
there's this one company in particular in SF that was
mhm,
very much going after this type of marketing of
mhm,
use AI to replace your workers.
mhm.
I don't know if you saw those campaigns, but it had that like effect of okay,
Mhm.
rage baiting, like getting people
Yeah.
upset, but also scared, right?
Mhm,
But again, it worked for them because people were talking about them. But I don't know if I agree with that method of marketing. But yeah, so I saw that a lot. And this is a lot of conversations that would strike up in my personal life as well,
mhm.
where people were like, oh my God, you work in AI. That just hearing that makes me anxious of like my job and security and whatnot. So yeah.
I do think that AI, what really it has done, I think, is similar to what the internet's done. Is like if you're really smart and you know exactly what you want to do, you are now unbridled. You have unlimited power. So I think the issue, like anything in life, which I'm assuming your parents probably did the same thing, is like, what do you want to do with your life? Like, what do you actually want to do? And I think now more than ever, you have to be able to answer that question of like, what is your role? Where do you want to bring value? Because if it's not generalistic, but if it's vague or you can't really understand it, this is where AI can do a good job. Or if you become an expert, I think in a domain, AI is very helpful because you can now run multiple agents to do your workflow automation. If you're a marketer, helping to break down some just dashboarding or helping create content. I think it just became that challenge where just if you're really good at what you do, it makes you better. But if you're not really good, then there's more of a threat because an AI agent might not be as good, but if it's half the price and you're not that good, it's just like this awkward middle ground where I mean, all my mentor, people I mentor who are graduating from university, that's where it becomes challenging when you have no work experience competing with the agents. Hard to see, though. Like I said, hard to say what is actually going to happen. But I've met a lot of people who said they're going to replace their employees with AI. I've yet to meet a lot of organizations who have done it at scale effectively yet. Some have, but it's still one of those things where, again, I think one of the challenges, and I loved your experience on this, is you're maybe a founder, you're a small team. I'm going to hire a AI marketing agent. But because you
Hmm.
don't know what marketing does, you can't do the great prompt. So now you have a very ineffective marketing, because the reason you hire people is to be able to answer those niche things. How do you run a campaign? Who's our target market? And AI yet can figure out your business for you. And I think that's the challenge we're seeing a bit more is we still need to know what questions to ask. And that's where people are really good at. If it's your domain, what question and what are best practices? Because AI still can't figure it out because it doesn't know what your product does yet.
Yeah, exactly. You can't automate what you don't know. Like you need to
Mm-hmm.
go figure out what your workflow and the task is, then be able to do it and have the information at hand. Also, just on that point of like
Mm-hmm.
wanting to automate a workforce, I just think, yeah, problematic. And I always tell people, and there's always like these concerns within organizations, even that I go talk to, of like the fear of AI and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what I do and the work, just even with automations, like
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think we're there yet where it can fully, like you said, take over a job. And I think the power is to support people to do a better job
Mm-hmm.
and spend their time doing work that's more meaningful rather than like just
Mm-hmm.
scouring through their inbox all day and doing those type of mundane like redundant tasks. So yeah, that's a lot of the question that I have to clarify a lot of times when I work with
Yeah.
teams.
I think the best book I read about this. So I was looking behind me. Let me see if it's here. No, it's not. I'll find it after. Oh, wait, here. Deep medicine. Well,
Deep
this is
medicine.
like a few years ago. But the whole idea was that with AI in healthcare, it allows doctors to be human again, to not have to do their documentation, to sit and have bedside manner, ask the patient, have that conversation, and take it a little bit deeper. And I think that's the thing you were touching on a bit, is that if AI can do a lot of the documentation, workflow automation, the kind of behind the back data entry, allows you to have a candid conversation, to talk to your customers one on one, to have, if you're a doctor, have a conversation with your patient because you're not spending 20 minutes documenting after every session. I think that's the thing that was unexpected probably in the early days of like, well, what is AI replacing? AI is replacing something. It's cool, but it's okay. Can we put the human back in human work? And I'm seeing that more and more. Like I said, with sales, with golfing, I just really hope other sports become more popular because I do not want to start golfing, or even in marketing, being able to run more in-person campaigns. And I've seen even that, the push to having these cultural based things because you want to bring people together and have that human connection.
Yes.
Is there anything you think of, kind of as we're getting closer to the end here, is there anything you think of that is no, not conscious. Is there anything within the AI world you think is going to be the next, not big thing, but you think is underrepresented or people aren't paying attention to that you think will make the biggest impact, at least in the classic 5 years is too far, but like in the next year? Is there anything that comes to mind where you're like, I think this is really where we can get a lot more value out of, whether it be workflows, whether it be revenue generating or anything for young founders?
I think the biggest thing I see being undervalued is the roles and opportunities emerging to understand AI automations within your domain. There's so many things within AI that you can apply even towards your business. But if you kind of also what you touched on earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that if you're kind of vague, you don't know what your expertise is,
Mm-hmm.
become an expert in leveraging AI within your domain when you're a marketer. Like, how can I use this to help my team, help myself, and then help my team and be that person who helps like spread the AI gospel
Mm-hmm.
and kind of be the leader. And I think there is so much opportunity there because I see this right now a ton. Businesses are finally at the turning point where, there was like the pioneer leaders who have been already utilizing AI or CEOs who are forward thinking. They're like, we need AI as part of our core operations. But
Mm-hmm.
now all the other companies, kind of like the later ones to the trend where they see, oh, okay, this thing isn't going away. We actually need to
Yeah.
figure it out. A lot of pressure for C suite and execs to figure out how to use it. They are looking for champions. And I see a lot of people who are maybe just in like lower, I guess, in the hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
within the business, being able to rise and get more power, be a part of these meetings and decisions
Mm-hmm.
because they have that skill set. And it's rare. So I think, I guess, I don't know if a technology
Mm-hmm.
in particular, but leveraging this opportunity right now to become an expert in your domain. I think job security, but also gives you a seat at the table to decide how it's being spread.
Mm-hmm. I think I had the same. This is the same thing that occurred, I'd say, in the early 2010s with like social media, where you could be a 20-year-old recent grad and you might get called to the CEO's office and say, hey, what is what does this Instagram mean? Do we need a presence? Do we need to have a Facebook page? And because all the executives, in their 50s, they're like, I don't know, we need the youngest person on the company. And this was their way of kind of having that gap where you were an expert in the domain of this new technology that no one else was. I'm seeing the same thing on the AI front as well, where in my world, it's probably similar to yours. I assume everyone knows everything about AI because that's all I do all day. I'm researching it. I'm having calls with every gosh darn tool, .ai, .io, every tool I've ever heard of. So I feel like everyone's doing this, but then I'll have a meeting with someone in a different industry and they're like, have you heard of ChatGPT? And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is wild. It's like introducing a car to someone who's just been riding a horse. Like there's so many. I think that's the thing is in your world, this is normal. This is my life. But to a lot of other people, like you said, you can get you a seat at a table because you can become the domain expert. And I also think my one piece of advice I give to everyone, because I've had similar to you, a bunch of random roles in my life. I've always been a little bit quirky with how I've gotten jobs. I've always built a portfolio, always had a website since I started my career. And I think one thing I've always been promoting to people, especially early in your career, is like make a website, vibe code, or like build a little tool or a Substack or have a blog or have something. So when people look you up, you're like, oh, they're a thought leader in this. And I think the ability to learn, at least share your information is so valuable because I think one of the things that AI has done is mass produce content for everyone. But it still means if you can just make your own content, like have a LinkedIn page, my one, this is a random aside, my one sneaky thing I used to tell people before a job interview is like write a blog post or write a tweet or something about the interview you're about to go to about an idea so that in the interview, be like, well, I should write about this. And these small little things to show your thought expert can get you so far. You'd be surprised. This has happened so many times where I'm like, oh, I just wrote a blog post about how healthcare and automation is important. And that people are like, oh my God, he's a thought leader. I'm like, this was like 10 minutes to research. But I think it's one of those things, like you said, becoming a thought leader, getting your seat at the table and the ability to do that now because there's a gap in knowledge. Because most of the time as a junior employee, you will not know more about the industry than the executives. It's just impossible with 50 years of experience. But now you kind of have the edge of the wedge to get in there. So I think that's a really good piece of advice. I think that is oftentimes overlooked, that your knowledge shouldn't be taken for granted.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I second that advice you just said and what you tell people. And really, I think what it encompasses is build a brand for yourself, however big. Like, fine, maybe like the goal isn't to become like TikTok famous, but having a presence online through some medium to show that you are an independent thinker, thought leadership. And yeah, that's actually also what I say to people as well. And it positions you in a unique way where now whatever happens in your career, right, like shifts happen, you're looking for a new opportunity, you're not the one looking for jobs are coming to you because you position yourself at like a different caliber compared to the rest of talent.
And I think one thing that is surprising is how you don't need that many followers. This is, again, everyone wants to be YouTube famous, you need a million subscribers. I know many people who've had, 100, 200 people on LinkedIn, but because they post the content, they talk about a specific substation, they're getting job offers and people reaching out because, like you said, same with AI. If you have an expertise in a very niche thing or very focus, people who are looking for that, you show up. And I think that's the thing, helping stand out, because it's surprising how many people don't have a presence, or at least don't realize how not low lift it is lift, but how much of an impact it can make. And we're seeing that now with, I think, PayPal hiring CEO, content creator to help their CEO become a content. I mean, in my life, with my family, this has been a big thing, right? Building content as an executive gets you a ton of deals. And that people are underlooking this now. Every CEO you'll talk to, this is, I mean, I go off on tangents, but this is something that's really funny. Growing up, everyone's, like within our generation, it's like this YouTube famous thing. Everyone kind of wants to be YouTube famous because it looks fun. Even though you deny, like, I don't want to do it. Everyone's like, I kind of want to be it. And the older generation is like a rock star. So many of, my parents' generation were like, well, I don't understand this TikTok. I don't understand this YouTube thing. But they all want to be rock stars. And now I'm seeing a lot of these CEOs starting making content. They now have a personal videographer walking around with them to build content. So it is becoming popular. And I think that is the next wave, where it's that personal brand that can
Mm-hmm.
stand out. This kind of always goes back to the being human, and being more human is probably how you stand out now in the world of AI, which is kind of gone full circle. like everything else in life.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, even with me with my company, it's actually been all inbound because of my LinkedIn branding and positioning.
Mhm.
So it's funny. And I feel like it's even funny, like talking about LinkedIn as a channel for that, because just even a few years ago, like when I used to be in San Francisco,
Mhm.
like everyone used to be like, "Ugh, LinkedIn, it's so cringe, blah, blah, X, Twitter is the way." And now it's been like, it doesn't really matter. It's a platform. And now people are especially leveraging LinkedIn. And it's been great for me. So yeah.
Yeah, it's wherever whatever you enjoy, wherever you're going to stay consistent. I think that's the important thing. Just because it takes a lot of cycles and a lot of not I say practice, but just a lot of just no one watching your content or listening to you until you learn. It's the same thing with sales. You're gonna get a lot of no's until you understand, and same with being a founder. And it's just you have to like it, because if you don't like it, you'll never do it. And I think that's the most important thing. Find what you like to do and just do more of it. But as we wrap up here, obviously we talk about a plethora of things. Anything, if you're, I mean, this is the classic thing, but if you're a founder, you think, okay, you're a founder, you're looking to scale a business, any words of advice? I mean, we kind of talked about this, but like when mapping out the AI automation, AI workflows, AI tools to use, or anything to keep top of mind, just because, like anything else, this can feel so overwhelming to people.
Yeah. Um, okay, so for one, I think the next winners in the next few years are going to be companies who understand, who are AI enabled first, where
Mhm.
you have automations helping your team run, because it's really about margins, right? And it's like
Mhm.
it's growing without scaling, without the bloat as well, where it's very strategic. And I would say the biggest thing to start off with is look at your pain points. Where is time bleeding as a founder? Resources,
Mhm.
lack of time. That is what everyone's struggling with. And I've actually been talking to a bunch of startup teams as
Mhm.
well who are kind of going through that. And it's funny because you always put off tasks because you're like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. But this is the one task that you put in a bit of time, it will open up more time. And
Mhm.
also, if you invest in it early on and create your systems and your foundation, as you scale and add more people, you have that playbook in place. Whereas
Mhm.
when it's a thing for later and later comes, you're now trying to like redo your foundations and the best practices. So I would say just start off with building one automation. If it's like a meeting prep thing, right? You're always
Mhm.
taking calls, and then from there you'll start. So put in the effort, or maybe like bring on someone who's forward thinking who
Mhm.
will play around with these tools for you. And yeah, I guess that's kind of the
Mhm.
rounded up advice I'd give.
I think that's a great advice. Focus on the problems, then find the solutions, not the other way around, which sounds silly, but most people are trying to find solutions to problems that don't exist,
Yeah,
especially right
founders
now.
fall into that. Yeah.
It's a very common problem. But yeah, as we wrap up here, if people want to get in contact or more about you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
LinkedIn, baby. Um, I can send you my LinkedIn. It's
Mhm.
Devreet Dulay, my first and last name. And if you want to check out my company, more what we do, you can check out internalautomations.com.